welcome to the Research Coordinator Enrichment Series. In March today, the topic is Emergency Use Access. And today we have Kirsten Haney with the MCW Clinical Trials Office. And then a little bit later, we also have Lori Rush with the Children's HRPP Office, who's gonna do a short presentation as well. And I think that's all for introductions.
Awesome.
If you want to say a bit more, you're welcome to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll hand it on
So,
over.
yeah, thank you. So we're just going to kind of go over the process and the workflow of how we typically are going to be handling emergency use cases here at MCW. This came up because we recently had a case back in December that we pursued. And so we learned a lot doing that. And so we just thought we'd kind of present here and go over the process that we followed. So first up, just kind of an overview of what emergency use is. This is referring to a single patient case. Obviously, if it's in an emergency situation, it's emergency use. If it's non-emergency, then we're pursuing it as treatment use. Emergency use is a situation that requires a patient to be treated before we can make a submission to the IRB. So treatment's expected to have a rapid effect. This isn't intended for to slow disease progression, things like that. This is just more of an emergency basis. So in comparison with emergency use, we're going to be administering treatment within a certain number of hours or days, whereas with non-emergency, it's not an emergent situation. Typically with non-emergency, treatment's going to be administered about 30 days after FDA submission, unless you hear back sooner. Whereas with emergency use, after your FDA request is submitted, you're submitting an IRB submission 5 days after that, and we're utilizing the medication immediately. In both situations, though, this is it can be reviewed by an IRB chair or a designee. We'll get into a lot of that more later. So if you think you have an emergency access case, where do you kind of begin? So step one is going to be determining whether or not emergency use is actually appropriate. This is going to be done by the treating physician. Up to the right there, we have all of the criteria. This came straight out of the SOP. So this is all the criteria that needs to be met in order for emergency use to be valid. It has to be confirmed by an independent physician. So it's not just the treating physician that is making this decision. The decision also has to be backed by an independent physician. And then you have to determine that the patient has not had prior use of this drug. And you're getting this all in writing, documenting that this decision tree was followed and that it is in fact a case for emergency access. So then where to begin? We're going to meet directly with the requesting physician. This is going to be your step two. So this is where we're going to review the situation more in depth. You're going to ask for the patient's name, their MRN, the name of the drug, who the manufacturer for the drug is, because you're going to be working closely with them as well. And then a brief overview of the patient's specific diagnosis and treatment. So just making sure that the physician has discussed the situation with the patient and that the patient is interested before proceeding. Reviewing the process that you're going to follow with your PI here and determining the best routes for communication, and then ensuring that there's a secondary contact. A lot of the times, treating physicians are going to have clinic hours, things like that, but these emergency use cases move really quickly. So just making sure you have a secondary contact as well. And then providing your PI with all contact information for yourself as a coordinator. A lot of the times that's going to be outside of like email and Teams, things like that, giving them ways to get a hold of you quickly. So step three is going to be alerting the troops. So this is a very critical step, and it's also where things start moving really quickly. You're going to be sending out a mass communication to the IRB, to IDS, to OCRIC, GCO, any of your departmental contacts, explaining the patient's situation, providing documentation that the emergency use criteria is met, and then you're opening those lines for communication right away. So the IRB, IDS, and OCRIC all offer supporting documentation to help you get through this. There's roadmaps, there's checklists, all that kind of stuff, which I know Lori's going to get into later. But they all do offer these resources, which is fantastic. So make sure you're including the general inbox emails for each of the departments, as well as specific contacts, just to kind of route that communication a little bit more directly. And then I just listed some of the main contacts off to the side over here, like Scott Brooks and Kristen in the IRB, obviously Bobby, and then Anne Marie, and then Neil and GCO. So you obviously, at this point, you have the patient on board, you have things moving here at MCW. Your next step is going to be contacting the manufacturer. You're going to confirm that they have a program that offers emergency access. If not, you ask if they're willing to support your case. You're going to be discussing who will do the IND submission, which we're going to get into that next, but that's most often going to be us here at MCW. And then requesting any materials. So if you need a protocol, if you need investigator's brochure, any of that kind of stuff, make sure that one of the first things you do is request that information from the manufacturer, because there is times that this will require a CDA. And that can cause delays. So IDS does need that drug product information, so the dosing information to create their Epic and Willow builds. So if they don't have that information, they're kind of held up on their end. But if we need a CDA, we're also held up on that end as well. So if a CDA is required, this has to be submitted under the agreements tab in eBridge, which would then route it to GCO for review. Like I said, this can be a little bit of a snag in the timeline. So just making sure that you're getting on this right away and that we're able to get those documents and keep things rolling. You're going to determine a direct contact at the manufacturer who's going to help you with this case. So that's going to be who you're going to be communicating with regarding shipment and all of your documents you need and that kind of stuff. Just having one direct contact. And then identify if the drug is being provided for free, whether or not it has to be purchased, if shipping costs are covered. In our most recent emergency use that we did, the drug was provided for free, but shipping costs were not covered. And so that was something that the patient's family had to pay for. And so just making sure that they're aware of that before you go through all of this work. For this study alone, it was almost $4,000 for shipping. So even though the family had already said, like, yes, we want to pursue this emergency use application, obviously now finding out it's going to cost $4,000 could also slow down the process. So just making sure that you're getting that information right away and able to provide that to the family so that they can agree whether or not they want to buy the drug or pay the shipping. Yeah.
So how do you get hold of anyone from the pharma company? Like,
From the manufacturer.
yeah.
So typically, if you go to their website, you can find contacts, things like that. But otherwise, the FDA also has contacts. So the FDA emergency use, you can reach out on their website. There's a tab and I have the website and the link later on in here. And you can find, they can help you get contact information. But otherwise using general emails and obviously putting in your title that you're looking for emergency access and that it's urgent, they can route you because they typically have a person in a certain department that specializes in that.
Okay, do you sign like a contract with them about the pricing and all that? Or this is just all verbal because it's happening so fast?
Because it's happening so fast. So for, like I said, this one, the drug was free. And then for shipping, there was no contract. It was just that it was the company didn't want to pay for it up front. So instead the invoice was sent straight to the patient's family and then they paid it. Otherwise the company would pay for it and then they would invoice the patient, that kind of stuff. But there was technically no legal contract about the financial piece of it because yeah, it's happening so quickly. We literally found out on Saturday night how much it was. The PI called the patient and it was shipped by Sunday morning. So it happens very quickly and yeah, there wasn't any way to get that in writing. And so then the other item that you're going to address with the manufacturer is requesting the letter of authorization or letter of cross-reference from the manufacturer. You need this to submit your IND to the FDA. So right away request that letter of authorization. So after you have, like I said, everything moving here, you have the manufacturer on board, the patient's on board, PI's understanding the process we're going to follow. You're going to get your IND submission ready with the FDA. So you're going to determine your FDA contact utilizing the emergency use contact list. Like I said, at the end of this, I do have a link to that website. It is helpful to call them with the PI to let them know that the submission is coming. So for this one, the PI and I just scheduled a time where we called into, they have a generic number, but that provided us with a direct contact at the FDA. She gave us her email to send it to. We talked to her about the case, so she knew exactly what was coming. And then once we hopped off the phone, we were able to send everything to her. We just wanted to double check all the things we needed in our submission. you will determine if an ICF is being used. So the IRB is a great resource for you to help determine whether or not you're going to be using an ICF. If so, they do have the emergency use template on the HRPP website. For your submission, you're also going to need to draft a cover letter that includes a brief summary of what is being requested and who the FDA can contact about the request. That's going to be obviously the treating physician as well as yourself. And then the physician and coordinator, it really helps to work together to complete the 3926. This is the official FDA form where you're explaining what you're asking for, essentially, in this submission. And so it really helps to work together, make sure you're compiling all the information, that's all complete. The 3926 is where, as a coordinator, you're going to get a lot of your information from for your IRB submission later on, that kind of stuff. So just making sure that it's done well and very thoroughly, making sure your 10A and 10B boxes are marked. And then the FDA does have guidance on completing this as well, which is linked in their form. And then the physician is going to be the one submitting it on the FDA Next Gen portal, which I have a link for that as well in the next slide. Submissions can be done over the phone to the FDA. However, when we were talking to them, they basically said that while you can submit it over the phone, you still have to go into the portal to send them all the documents anyways. And so it's actually a lot quicker to just use the portal, and they kind of prefer that. So the 3926, it does require the treating physician's assessment. You have to include your rationale for your use of the drug, list of medications tried and failed, the patient's disease and condition descriptions, medical history, prior treatment. All of the information that they could possibly need goes into this form. But it does also require a treatment protocol that the physician plans to follow, including dose, duration, dose continuation, monitoring and dose reductions, all that kind of stuff. So if you don't have all of that included in there, they're going to send it back and ask for it. So just making sure that all of those elements are included in your 3926, because the whole purpose of it is that the FDA can literally look at that form and see exactly what you plan to do the entire time the patient's on drug. So after you have the submission all prepared, like I said, the physician's going to submit it in Next Gen. It's really helpful to do this on a Teams meeting, so that you can kind of help and also know what's going on, where the submission's at, that kind of stuff, what exactly got submitted. It's obviously not the most user-friendly portal. It's a little confusing. So screen sharing was really helpful. Obviously, no sharing passwords. You can't take the PI's login and submit it for them. But coordinators can also establish proxy access within the Next Gen portal. The FDA can set that up for you. You won't have access to complete submissions, but you can at least be added onto one and see the progress and see where things are at. So like I said, that your submission is going to include your cover letter, your 3926, the CV of the treating physician, the LOA that we requested from the manufacturer, as well as if you're using an ICF, a copy of the ICF. There's the link for the portal. And then you're just waiting for communication from the FDA. They might reach out with more questions or comments depending on the information you provided them. But if your submission is sufficient, you'll receive that IND letter from the FDA. So then your next step will be, once you have that IND, is going to be ordering your drug. So you're going to provide this to your contact at the manufacturer, and then they're going to begin the process of drug shipment on their end. You have to provide the manufacturer with contact information for shipment issues and questions. Once again, this is going to probably be your physician as well as you as a coordinator. Make sure to copy IDS on all communications regarding drug shipment so that they can see if there's any hiccups, they can see that tracking information, they can see where things are in the process as they're going to be the ones receiving it. So it's really important that they kind of know what's going on. Be sure to request tracking if available. For this recent one that we had just done, we had requested tracking, of course, and the patient's family paid for tracking, but we never actually received any tracking. And they had told us that it would take, I think they said 5 days to get because this was international, it was from China. And so they said it would take about 5 days to get through customs before we would see it hit us in America. And they shipped it. They said they were shipping it on Sunday, but I think they shipped it on Saturday, and we had it by Monday morning. And so we didn't have any tracking. We had no idea it was coming in, but luckily we did have that cover letter. So we were able to, the customs reached out to us at the Chicago airport to kind of be like, hey, we have this study medication, what's going on? And we were able to help get it through customs. So just making sure that you have those cover letters and as much information as possible. And like I said, requesting tracking would have been really helpful because then at least IDS and myself would have known it was coming. But yeah, so the patient can also provide a letter stating that they intend to use the medication only for their sole treatment of their illness, as well as their contact information. We did this as well with the most recent emergency use. And that was also very helpful. They did reach out and confirm with the patient as well that they were in fact the ones receiving the medication, and it helped move things along in customs and not get held up. So drug arrival, when drug gets here. So once the drug arrives on site, IDS will obviously log arrival. The physician will plan a treatment date. Obviously, this can be same day. They can be standing there waiting for the drug to arrive. Obviously, this is emergency use. So, but IDS does need to be notified ahead of time to ensure that the proper steps are taken for dispensing. They obviously still have things on their end that they need to do to be ready. And then they'll deliver the medication to the patient during their visit and provide patient education. Obviously, on the physician side of things, they'll notify the patient when drug has arrived. They'll be consented using the non-IRB approved ICF that was submitted with your IND application, which obviously feels super illegal to be consenting a patient on a not IRB approved ICF. But that's obviously the process we follow for emergency use. Any eligibility and screening procedures will be completed for the treatment plan, and then ultimately medication can be dispensed at that point. So after the patient has received drug, we have 5 days to submit an IRB submission. You can start the submission during the process that if you have time, obviously, like I said, I know this happens quickly, and the reason we waive the IRB submission is because of how quickly it happens. But if you have time, I highly recommend starting it throughout the process. That's kind of what we did. Titling it using emergency use, as well as the drug name, PI name, month and year. And then most of the information that you're going to need for your submission is going to be documented in your 3926, which is obviously coming straight from your treating physician. So it's an excellent resource to use. Making sure throughout the process and in your IRB submission that you're documenting who you communicated with in the IRB and HRPP during the process so that they can see you did conduct or consult with the IRB. And then you're uploading the ICF, the LOA that you got from the manufacturer, the IND from the FDA, and then any IVs protocols that you received from the manufacturer, and then the 3926 that was submitted. Signed copies of the ICF and 3926 are not required at the initial submission, but they will be requested at the 30-day CPR. If you have them available, it's obviously best practice to just provide them in the initial submission. So once the IRB has acknowledged the emergency use submission, the coordinator will be responsible for submitting follow-up reports and continuing progress reports. So this includes if there's any changes to the treatment plan, such as dose reductions or discontinuations. Make sure you're staying in contact with the treating physician between reports to ensure that you're aware of any complications that come up. The IRB does require 30 days post-use for its first report and then 90 days post-use. If treatment exceeds 90 days, then the IRB will assess and issue longer approval periods as needed. The FDA only requires yearly reporting. Obviously, they also require reports for deaths or serious unexpected adverse events within 7 days of the occurrence. And then some manufacturers will also require monthly or weekly reports or updates. So just make sure in the process that you ask kind of directly what the manufacturer is looking for on reporting so that you are able to provide that to them as well. So then just some tips and tricks here. So communication is obviously key. Daily touch bases with the physician is really helpful. Like I said, this moves so quickly that within 24 hours, things can completely change and progress. So just making sure you're making that time to touch base daily to kind of update them with where things are at. Updating the extended team every other day. So like I said, that's that mass communication and kind of just replying all to that original communication and keeping everyone in the loop of where things are at is also a big help. Probably you'll feel like you're annoying them, but it's a good thing. Pay attention to your checklists. There's a ton of moving parts that you have to keep tabs on. It's kind of all happening very quickly and all at once. So just making sure that you're not falling behind in one area, as that'll cause delays later on. So utilizing those internal and external checklists. So when it comes to your submission, just make sure to note which internal departments require submissions. So OCRIC requires a submission for administrative oversight, and that's beforehand. That's not afterwards, like the IRB submission. GCO requires that agreement submission if you need a CDA. Once again, that's beforehand. That's not after, like the IRB. And then IDS also needs to submit Epic, Willow, or Beacon builds requests before receiving the drug, which this requires those study materials we talked about earlier. So even though your IRB submission is postponed until after medication is administered, there's still all of these other submissions that you kind of have to keep an eye on in the forefront here. And then obviously documentation, document everything. Yeah.
And back to the previous slide, do OCRIC and all the other regulatory local bodies have special teams that approve these submissions fast, or how? Because time is of essence here.
Yeah.
So how does that work? They
Um,
just prioritize this over other
I was
stuff?
gonna say, I think, I don't want to speak for them, but that is what it appeared, yes. That with OCRIC, it was approved very quickly. And then with GCO, it was routed as normal, probably, because that still took about 2 weeks. So,
It was also over the holiday.
yeah, we
So
did do
things were
this
slowed
emergency
down.
use case over the holiday, like we got it a couple days before Christmas. So this had Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day in it and stuff. So that obviously can
Yeah,
cause some delay, and it was a lot of weekends, things like that.
I'm sure FDA doesn't work on holidays, on weekends.
They do not. We do, but they do not. FDA does not. And so obviously timely responses can kind of make or break EU cases. The manufacturer may be in another country, which was going to mean midnight communications to keep the ball rolling, which was definitely the case for this one. Like I said, they were in China, so they were typically working while I was supposed to be sleeping. So it was a lot of in the middle of the night is when things moved the most, which is why, like I said, just those meetings with your treating physician every day, because a lot of the times while they were sleeping is when everything started moving, and I'm sending them a bunch of emails of like, hey, sign this, submit this. And so just those touch bases to kind of let them know where things are at. And then a lot of the times the physician has clinic during the day. Obviously this isn't a planned research study where they know that they're going to have to dedicate all their time to this specific research case. This is an emergency use application. So they still have clinic. So you might need to schedule meetings outside of business hours to update them on the progress that you made that day. For our case, we typically scheduled our meetings for 7 o'clock at night, just because that's when clinic was over and we were able to kind of meet. And so just knowing that that responsiveness is really important. But yeah, outside of that, these are those resources. I have links here to SOPs, the FDA website, all that kind of stuff, if you guys need them. But otherwise, I can for questions for you.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And then we can hand it.
Hand it on to Lori. Yeah, so if
Yeah.
anybody has questions.
I don't have a question, but I do have something to add to piggyback off of one of Amit's questions. In this particular case, it was the family who, in doing research on their family member's condition, came across an article.
Yeah, about the drug.
About the drug and a study being performed in China,
Mhm.
and then reached out to their
Physician,
right?
yeah.
Their primary care physician or oncologist.
Oncology, yeah.
To get things going.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were all kind of, it wasn't necessarily something that the physician was like, oh, I was contacted about this, like, let's get going with it. It was kind of the patient's family came in with it, and we were running completely blind of having to find contacts and things like that. But like I said, those are out there, those resources are out there. It's a lot of scouring websites and FDA contacts and people just forwarding you on to the next person, but yeah. Any other questions?
Just a comment, just similarly, like what you were saying that the family found this drug. I just recently read, it was another oncology, and I forgot what kind of cancer it was, but family reached out to a physician who had published a kind of a, not even the whole paper, was a case study kind of a thing. But they were using AI to scour through all the different treatment modalities and what combinations could be used. And published a case report on, certain chemo plus radio combination that was not standard practice. And the patient tried that as a last go and is in remission now.
Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah, it's obviously they're worth it. Our patient that we pursued this for, we dosed back at the beginning of January and we just submitted it's our 120-day CPR because he was still on drug. Recently there was more progression that we actually just 2 weeks ago, I think, took him off drug, but it made a massive difference. It was very much life-saving for him. So it was very worth, obviously, all the time and energy and.
Yeah, he was in a lot of pain before, and this
Yeah.
eased a lot of his pain.
Yeah, it was definitely something the family was extremely grateful that we were able to pursue for them. So it's a lot of work, but it's definitely high reward.
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat. So we're gonna hand it over to Lori Rush from Children's Wisconsin HRPP.
Hello. Can I share
Yeah,
my screen? Okay.
absolutely.
Thanks for this opportunity. Kirsten, this was great because I know these things don't happen that often. And so giving everybody some information about what to do when these unexpected things come up, I think is fabulous. I wanted to share our institutional processes. So I'm the research integrity manager for those who don't know me at Children's Wisconsin. And we get requests for expanded access pretty frequently in our space. And we have some different processes when you're doing work in children's space using children's or involving children's patients. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of go through our processes for study team members that are working in our space. And sometimes you don't know that you're going to be doing something in children's until it happens. So we wanted to have this opportunity to show you our processes for emergency use and expanded access. If I can just run through our checklist quick. So for those of you who are here, and I have seen some people that I know are in attendance that do work at Children's. So we thought this would be really helpful to show how we do things a little bit differently and the process. So we have created a guidance and a checklist tool for these situations. I'm sharing my screen talking about our emergency use for INDs. IDEs are a little bit different, so I just want to call that out for those of you who might be exposed to an emergency use situation. Drugs, a little different than devices. Sometimes devices are on site and people want to use them very quickly. So we do have a separate guidance with connections to FDA's resources for IDEs as well. I can show you that when I'm done going through this, but wanted to share with you our checklist for emergency use. You can access this on our external webpage. We used to have it on our Connect page, but we've found out that some people sometimes have problems getting connected to Connect. Go ahead, Michelle. Is it
It's
on
still there.
external or
Yeah,
no?
it's still there. It's in both places now, so whichever is
Okay.
easier.
Yep, you could find it on Connect. You can find it on our external landing page. It's there so you can quickly access it. And so we go through a little step-by-step checklist. We know that time is of the essence, but we wanted to get these things out there for you. So the first point that we make is that the provider that's going to do this in children's space has to be a licensed physician at Children's. A few years ago, we had a situation where a Froedtert physician was helping a children's physician, and they wanted to do a procedure, and they had to actually get children's privileges. So in these situations, you need to be working with us quickly to navigate some of those requirements that we have. And then we ask that you contact us immediately and loop us in. You had your slide, Kirsten, about calling in the troops. Well, we're the troops for Children's. And if you talk to us and you contact us at our HRPP main email address, we're monitoring that during the day. And you can reach us, and we will in turn notify everybody that needs to be notified at the MCW IRB. And maybe I just need to preface this by letting people know who aren't as familiar with our space. We rely on the IRB services of the medical college. So they're going to do the IRB pieces, but we're still the HRPP for Children's. So we work very closely with our MCW IRB partners to navigate all of this together. And we work with our IRB chairs at MCW. So you can contact us through our main email. If it is after hours, our main phone number, and I believe our response email, if you emailed our main email, gives my cell phone number. So if it's after hours and you need to talk to us, you can call me and I'll walk you through some of this stuff. So then we continue on through our checklist. These follow the steps that Kirsten outlined. Ensure the drug can be obtained by contacting the manufacturer, get a letter of authorization. These are the same for any institution. But then when you get to who to notify at Children's, you need to notify our investigational drug services pharmacy rep, who is Jesse Kramer. Here's his email address and his contact information. So he's going to help facilitate the logistics of how to bring it into Children's Hospital. Then, as you mentioned, do the form 3926 to make the request. All of that is going to be the same. We talk about obtaining the consent or parental permission from the parent or legal guardian, and we will work with you if there's time to help with the consent language. And we do use the model or the template that is on MCW's HRPP website. And if the manufacturer has a template that they use, we ask that you merge the two together, and we're available. We'll drop everything for emergency use, and we'll work with you to get that consent done and review it. Even though it's not a formal IRB review and approval, we will help you navigate that. Michelle and I have been doing this for eons now, and we have a lot of experience about how to help with that. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if there's time. And then there also are steps that you need to go through. These are FDA's steps if consent is not possible, in terms of getting a physician not otherwise involved to certify that you couldn't get consent. So we do put this in the checklist. If you can get consent, and when I say consent in our world, it's always parental permission, but we're talking about the regulatory term consent. If there is time, get it. If there's not time, we outline what you need to do for that. And then once you get the authorization from FDA, begin treatment. If you have time, and again, we know that these are emergency use situations, so there isn't often time, but if you can get time, we ask that you get our chief medical officer's clearance to begin the treatment. That is Dr. Gedite. Here's his contact information here, as well as his assistant. And then if it is not possible prior to all of this to notify us, within the 5 working days, we ask that you notify us and the MCW Pediatric IRB to do this at that time. So at any point in time that you're doing this, when you contact us, we will help walk you through it. We understand that time is of the essence, so it might not be immediately that you come to us, or it might not be before use, especially if the drug is on site. If for some reason you have an investigational drug on site and you have access to it, you still have to go through these processes. But if it's available, you might be administering treatment before you have time to contact us. Let me see, what else do we need to call out here that is different? We again talk about when to submit the 3926. the FDA resources, and the information about submitting follow-up reports. So those are some of the institutional differences for children's space for emergency access. At the beginning of this document, I'll just share with anybody that might use it. We also have the same checklist, but it's for expanded access where you have more time to go through this process and you have to submit in eBridge prior to review and get IRB chair concurrence. We also have a checklist for that you can follow if you find yourself in that situation. And here is our checklist for emergency use of IDEs. Similar, but there are a few differences that this walks you through as well in terms of when to contact us, when to contact FDA. So
And
that
just
is
to
our-
reiterate, just to
Mhm.
reiterate what Kirsten had said earlier, this is for a single patient. If you're
Mhm.
talking more than one patient, then we're gonna talk to you about a different process potentially. But
Exactly.
typically the emergency uses, I have never seen one that wasn't for an individual, but sometimes the expanded access can go beyond one patient, so.
Yeah.
Just
This
to
is
clarify,
specific.
yeah, this is
One
specific
patient, you
to,
get specific patient approval.
Right.
Exactly, Michelle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the other thing I just wanted to remember, I don't know if you mentioned this, Kirsten, but when you're doing the 3926, and I only bring this up because I've caught where they've missed doing this in section 10, make sure that you're selecting 10B. If for emergency use, if there is time, we can get that chair concurrence often before you even start treating. But if it's a non-emergent, if you don't do the 10B for chair concurrence, it will need to go to the fully convened board, which can just add time. So just pointing that out, if you want it to go for chair concurrence rather than the full committee, to make sure that's selected.
That is a good point, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one last thing, when there is time and you're going to do the submission in eBridge prior to treatment, we ask that you meet with us quickly. And we're very nimble. We'll cancel meetings if we have to. I'm always looking for a reason to not have a meeting. We will meet with you and help you go through the eBridge application and make sure you're checking the correct boxes. We have found that sometimes the incorrect boxes are checked and it routes it in a weird way and it asks for clearances or sign-offs that aren't necessary. So if we meet with you, and here's our little disclaimer before submitting, contact us, we'll meet with you, we'll go through it. And what that has done is helped ensure that it doesn't get hung up along the way and it gets to the chair as quickly as possible for that sign off. So please do that. Don't hesitate to ask for us to meet with you, help you go through that PRO, make sure nothing is checked inappropriately so that it zips through. One other thing that we have seen that sometimes holds these up is that the department head has to sign off in eBridge. So if you are submitting for chair concurrence, you should contact your department approver and say, hey, we have this emergency or this very time sensitive request. Be on alert when you see it, hit submit, because it can't get routed until that's gone past that step. And sometimes if that person isn't alert, they aren't checking and they're not signing off to get it.
And we have, as we're keeping eyes on these, I have made lots of phone calls to try to track down the person who needs to move it forward, just to let them know, so we can help with that if need be.
Absolutely.
Laura, do you want to pull up the browser and I can just point them to where this is on the external side?
Yes, let me share. You can tell me what to click on. One second. And while we're doing that, does anybody have questions that we can be answering for you?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. You want me to go to the external site, Michelle?
Yeah, for those of you who are familiar with Connect, it's still in the same place, but I'll show you where, and we're gradually loading things on the external side, which makes it easier to get to. So if you go to childrenswisconsin.org, up at childrenswi.org.
Am I there? I should be there.
Yeah, you're there. And then under research.
Let's see if I can follow instructions. Go ahead.
Scroll down. Then there's this drop down. Learn more about. And if you go to the HRPP, Lori, at the bottom. And
That's
click
us.
this, yep, click the search, the magnifier. And then you're gonna see another one, and this one, you're gonna go to investigator resources. And
That's
then
you guys.
that's you, yeah, click that. And then we've got our forms, and then the next section is guidances. And it's
Look at
right
how beautiful
under,
that is. Mhm.
it's right under the guidances. So the device one is first, and then the drug one is under there. And if you
Yep.
click that, it'll take you right to it.
And that is expanded access that encompasses emergency use situations. And if you see right here, checklist for compassionate use, if this request is emergency use, see this, and it drops you right to it. So should be easy for you all to navigate and just go through the checklist, call us immediately. We'll hold your hand through anything that we can help with. And all of those other things that Kirsten said about working with your clinician, working with the other areas,
Yes,
they
that's
stand,
all true.
just different people here. That's all.
Yeah.
So thank you. I really appreciate this time to highlight some of our just navigating our systems so that people don't get hung up. And, you know, for us, these are emergency and expanded access involving kids. So we want to be as timely as possible. And for expanded access, we have typically successfully gotten these things through within 2 days of submission. So we found that our navigation of this process and helping the clinician and the team submitting has really improved our efficiency. And we appreciate our partners at MCW, IRB, and our IRB chairs that are always willing to work with us on these. So
Yep.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Are there any other
Absolutely.
questions? Any other questions or comments from anybody? All right. Well, thank you all again for joining us, and have a great day. Please reach out with any questions. And then just a reminder, you'll get an email today with an evaluation link for the session, and we always appreciate you guys filling those out. So thanks so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.